Come on.
Sometimes we have some fun in the commercial breaks. Welcome to hour number 3, live right here on College Football Today. It's the third Saturday in October. It's week number 8 of this college football season. If somehow, some way, in an incredible college football campaign already, we could even up it with this type of Saturday, week 8 is set to deliver. And as we start this third and final hour, we haven't hit a ton on how big of a weekend this is in the ACC. Just quickly, before we dive into the matchups today, let's go back to last night. Florida State in Durham against Duke, getting 2.5 points. They had played Duke 22 times in their school's history since their first meeting dating back to 1992, and the Noles had won all 22. That came crashing down last night. Duke victorious 23-16. Lisi guy, FSU is 1-6 this season.
Yeah, undisciplined, quitting now, especially from an offensive line and defensive line perspective. They fell behind. They cut it to 20-16 and then gave up a field goal. But Mike Norvell has deeper problems. He's losing the locker room. It's clear. It's evident. They won 22 straight times against Duke. Never lost to the program in their history, and they lose last night. And you know what? I don't want to take away from what Manny Diaz has built there. 5.5 win total. Malik Murphy transfers in from Texas. They're bowl eligible. They're 6-1.
Yeah.
Dynamic job taking over for what Mike Elko built there. But Florida State is in shambles. I don't know what you do right now. You don't even have, Kev, players that look like want to play football at this point.
I don't think there's any defense to this. They are, yardage-wise, the worst offense in the ACC. But it goes beyond all that. I think this Duke game was kind of where you tip it over the mountain of,
for sure.
Hold on, wait. This is one of the worst Florida State teams we've literally ever seen. It's tough. Last year it was one of the best Florida State teams we've literally ever seen, but the bad outweighs the good when the bad is more recent than the good. I don't really understand how you let Mike Norvell keep his job, because they're going to lose to Miami. Come on. How are they not losing to Miami and Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Even if they pull off one of those wins, if this team gets to 4 wins, they might lift Norvell up like they won a Super Bowl. There's no way. This is a disaster beyond belief.
It would be the first time in Tallahassee they have won less than 5 games in a season since 1975. That was the year before the legend Bobby Bowden took over this Florida State program. And you mentioned what is still difficult on its way. Often a gradual drop-off, not a drastic decline like we have seen from a 13-win football team a season ago. The reason I bring it up is because we're about to highlight 3 ACC title contenders, all with 3-digit prices to win a conference crown, all at 6-1 or shorter. Florida State was the preseason favorite to win this conference championship. No longer, but neither is Miami. Miami has the second best price to win the ACC as I see it right now on at least the FanDuel Sportsbook, 30 cents behind the Clemson Tigers. Some movement, and maybe because of a difficult test for the Canes today, Joe, on the road in Louisville. Just a 4.5-point spread in favor of undefeated 6-0, 6th-ranked Miami. How competitive is this matchup today against the Cards?
Well, I think it could be competitive maybe for a half, but I really believe in the second half, guys. Miami pulls away. This is one of my better picks for the weekend. I do feel that Cam Ward and the Hurricanes win this potentially by double digits. They're coming out of a bye week. We talked about why maybe they're priced behind Clemson in the conference. Clemson's won 5 straight. They won 3 straight at home by 32 points per game. And you have Miami didn't cover on the Hail Mary, right, against Virginia Tech, 17.5-point favorite. Certainly didn't cover against Cal as the 10.5-point favorite. However, they're coming out of a bye week. Right, that's a huge difference maker for me on the road here. They could see, reset, get back to basics. And here's the biggest thing for Miami, Kev. 60% third down offense. That's number 1 in FBS.
Yeah.
It's not just Cam Ward. It's everybody else stepping up. Now I need to see it out of the rushing attack of Damian Martinez. He's been a slight disappointment, 292 yards compared to the expectations. I think there's a breakout game. No disrespect to Louisville, but this is clearly not the same defense and offense last year under Jeff Brom. Miami in a rout, double-digit win.
Lost by a touchdown to SMU, lost by a touchdown to Notre Dame. Those were the primary step-up spots for a Cardinals team that we're a ranked team heading into those two football games where the expectations have been shifted. It is a tricky spot for Miami because they have been tiptoeing with disaster for 2 games. Does Cristobal reset them off of a bye? Well, last year off a bye, the Georgia Tech game happened where he's lucky to have kept his job following that disaster. Yeah. So I don't run to Miami. I look to Cam Ward. The prop's been adjusted for the fact that Louisville this season has been abused by mobile quarterbacks. And Cam Ward is mobile. Yeah. Cam Ward to find the end zone is plus 170. I think what we talked about with our pay dirt picks, college price adjusted, I think that's a great number. I'm on Cam Ward to find the end zone.
He has scored in the last 2 games, albeit 2 non-covers for Miami, who started off 3-1 against the spread in their first 4. They allowed 41 total points in their first 2 games. They've allowed 72 combined in their last 2. And one of the reasons, Kev, I don't think we look at Cam Ward utilizing his legs. He's more of a pure passer. He has thrown for at least 304 yards in all 6 this year for Miami. Second leading passer in college football, only behind Jackson Dart, who has played a 7th game. But Louisville has struggled against those quarterbacks that can do it all. Kevin Jennings for SMU, a home loss for the Cards, as nearly a touchdown favorite against the Stangs. More than 275 and 100 yards on the ground. Anthony Calandria last week for Virginia, more than 275 through the air and 80 on the ground. Like that look for Cam Ward, at least 33 rushing yards against every Power 4 opponent this year for Miami. Speaking of Virginia, speaking of Clemson, who enters this Week 8 Saturday slate, the ever-so-slight favorite in front of Miami to win the ACC crown. They're a 3-touchdown favorite today, Joe, in Death Valley, laying 21 in a hook to Virginia. Since the Georgia loss to start the season, Clemson has been darn near perfect. 5-0, 4-1 against the spread, depending on where you got that number against Florida State. An average victory margin of more than 29 points per game. Do they keep the good time rolling today against Virginia?
I think Clemson wins, but I don't know. That this number is a little bit fishy to me compared to how dominant they've been at home over the past 3 weeks. Last time they played with Stanford, they still covered that number. It was a lower scoring game. And Virginia, with Calandria, their quarterback, still a balanced offense. Yeah. They want to run it. They want to work off of play action. Tony Elliott, the former OC for Dabo Swinney. If this game is 28, do you get the backdoor touchdown in the very end to potentially call off the dogs? That's always a cause of concern in regards to this type of matchup. I would take the points, guys, with Virginia, and I think the only way Virginia could be in this game is if it's lower scoring. So give me under 57.5, Kev.
This number's moved down to under 20.5, which would make me look towards Clemson. But I also have a self-imposed Clemson ban ongoing, which has been the best thing I've done with this team so far. Every week I look at their games and I'm like, oof, that's a little too high. And then Cade Klubnik is just throwing into the late third quarter, 55-yard touchdown passes here. The bet I really looked at was Klubnik under 2.5 passing touchdowns. We've not seen UVA give up a ton through the air. That's a lot for Klubnik to continue to do. Yeah. But I am not betting it because I am tired of losing money on Clemson games.
Cade Klubnik, 17 touchdowns to only a single interception in this 5-game win streak, 4 rushing scores as well. Phil Maffa has taken over as that lead back, at least 19 carries and 108 yards on the ground in the last 2. Quickly, let's head out to Palo Alto. SMU also in the ACC title conversation. And Joe, a 3-score favorite tonight against the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think they're just a beaten-up football team. To see how dominant Notre Dame was, 49-7, and to see that Riley Leonard expose that secondary yet again. They're giving up close to 280 passing yards per game, Kev. I don't think it stops against Jennings and SMU.
Yeah, it's a tough spot here where I would look towards Stanford, but Stanford also might have kind of gave it their all against Syracuse, ironically, and there just may not be anything left for this team.
The Stangs, fresh off a bye after beating Louisville in Louisville a couple of weekends ago. They've gone over in 3 straight, maybe some points against a bad Stanford passing defense. More on college football today. Quarterback comparisons next.
That kid on the 2-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People crystallized Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else. And they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
A monumental Week 8 college football slate on this Saturday live right here on CFT. Quarterback comparison time for our two significant matchups in the SEC. Of course, Kev, we start with the top 5 tilt tonight in Texas. It's the Longhorns, the number 1 team in the country, and Quinn Ewers hosting the number 5 team in the land. That's the Georgia Bulldogs and Carson Beck. Carson Beck's been going crazy in 2 of the last 3 games, throwing for more than 430 against Alabama, but they were playing from a deficit. Threw for more than 450 last week against Mississippi State, his career high. But Texas has allowed 1 quarterback to throw for more than 150 yards this year. It was Davis Warren and Michigan, and 131 of his 200-plus total came in the fourth quarter when the game was far out of reach. We have started often our conversations with Georgia the last few years on the defensive side of the football, but this is one of the better offenses in the country, at least according to the metrics. You like the Dogs. You've been barking all morning long.
Right.
If so, what does Carson Beck need to do tonight?
Well, it's interesting because I think that Georgia, to some degree, is going to want to, if they can, play a bit of bully ball here. I think they'd love to be able to pound the rock, as you mentioned. I talked about freshman Nate Frazier, who last week only 1 less carry than ETN, a couple of goal line carries, better than 3-1 to find in the end zone. Don't be scared to flirt with that number. But if this game ends up on Beck's arm, they're fine with that. I mean, we saw the comeback against Alabama. Don't forget, it wasn't a fake comeback. It wasn't Dak Prescott stuff, right?
Yeah.
That was legit. They took the lead in that game, and I think he has continuously gotten better. As we found out with Georgia, despite having this incredible football team, the pass-catching room really needed to figure itself out. There was so much hype around the tight end room, right? Yeah. Delp and Benjamin Urasek. I don't even know if Benjamin Urasek is on this football team. Delp starting to get better. Bell, Smith, love it. That group is really rounding into form, Joe. And I think you're seeing Carson Beck, where I don't really think I actually don't really feel like either of these guys are legit Heisman candidates. I don't. Mm-hmm. But I think Beck might still, he has an argument to be the best quarterback in college football.
No, you're right. I mean, look at his number today, 272.5. I mean, it's basically, 46 yards less than their average at 318.
Yeah.
So Kevin's right. I mean, He's got the big game experience. He did play from adversity in respect to the second half of Alabama, led his team back. They didn't win it, but he's good under pressure, right? We haven't really seen Quinn Ewers play from behind, right? The game last year where they played Alabama, they jumped out early and had the lead. Same thing with Michigan. So if Georgia can start fast, we'll see what Ewers is. I think if we're looking head-to-head, it's more important for Quinn to get through the 255. Why? Because then that means they're dictating tempo. They're not allowing Georgia to win the line of scrimmage. You know, I think a lower scoring game really favors Georgia in this matchup. Do you want to get it ugly? We'll play ugly. 24-13, I'm just saying, if we can get to that.
Yeah.
Right? And the other factor, Ben, that I'll just say, yours is not Milroe. Right? I keep saying that. He's not, the RPO game is not there. That's what caused Georgia a ton of fits against Alabama till they figured it out in the second half. So that's why it's important for yours to get through the 255 as opposed to, in my opinion, Beck.
Last week, call it rust, call it a unnecessary need to throw the ball a lot as they were hammering Oklahoma, just 20 of 29 in the Red River for $199, a touchdown and an interception. Not gaudy numbers by any means for Quinn Ewers. The first time against a ranked foe as Texas's starter, he had thrown for less than 246 last year in 5 games against ranked competition. At least 318 yards in all 5, 10 touchdowns to 4 INTs. Carson Beck has thrown for multiple touchdowns in all 6 regular season matchups as Georgia's starting quarterback against a ranked foe. Third Saturday in October rivalry on Rocky Top in Knoxville. Jalen Milroe and Nico Iamaleava. I want to start with the freshman Nikki Treats, Joe, to go back to you, because early this season against Chattanooga, even against NC State, fine despite multiple interceptions, but from that point, Nico Iamaleava, especially in SEC play, has thrown for 196 yards or less. You would think in this spot, albeit at home against Alabama, we cannot expect too much out of the freshman signal caller. But you look at this Crimson Tide defense, they are nowhere near the standard that had been set under Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa. If Tennessee is going to win outright as an underdog at home today in Knoxville, what does Josh Heupel need out of his starting quarterback?
I'd say 225. I really believe he's got to get over 200 because I think Alabama is going to stack the box and say, come on, Nikki Treats, try and beat us over the top. Just the way Florida did early on, and they contained them. It wasn't until some defensive breakdowns that they were able to pull that matchup out. So it is imperative for Nico to get over the 202.5 guys, because then that also means the rushing attack has probably got 250 on the ground, and that's where you want to be in this matchup. 450, 500 total yards of offense, and then Tennessee can steal it. So it's imperative to get him over that number, Kev.
You know, if you look so far, Bama's allowed 3 straight quarterbacks to throw for multiple passing touchdowns. Yeah. Again, the only power quarterback they held would be Locke, but would a fill-in. I mean, that probably would have been his over if you kind of consider it that way. I am tired of losing money on Nico. You know, in kind of some of those parlays, you take him down, you ask him for next to nothing, he gives you less than nothing. It's been very frustrating to see. I'll just, again, kind of point out on the other side, man, Jalen Milroe, you know, you made the point. I know you're not doing it intentionally, like 4 touchdowns, 4 picks. Yeah, but he's also ran in 5 scores.
No.
It's Jalen Milroe, what he does on the ground, and I know that's what what's the story?
I'm watching. I'm listening.
Yeah, no.
I'm saying we had this discussion with Pat Mahomes, 6-6 on Sunday. It was the same.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I mean, Milroe and Mahomes is exactly how it.
Right.
No, but listen. But again, fine. Pat doesn't do anything near Milroe on the ground. What Jalen Milroe does on the ground is his separator. Right? I mean, he's been for 2 years now in a row the best deep ball passer in college football. That has not missed a beat for 1 second here. And that's what's going to be the tough task for Tennessee. Here's a problem with Tennessee, man. You look at the strength of the schedule.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it is pretty underwhelming with what we are seeing from that football team. It really, really is.
Yeah, and when you look at the rushing yards, props, by the way, Jalen Milroe has the highest number for Alabama, 48.5. They only had a $104 last week against South Carolina. But to your point, Jalen Milroe, still 310 yards against Vanderbilt, still 374 against Georgia in that matchup. Other ranked opponents and teams in action today. We preview those games next.
Want to know who to draft and who to avoid in fantasy football? Or want to know who to place NFL season future bets on? Get an insider edge from the former NFL team doctors at Sports Injury Central. The 2024 NFL preseason injury guide is the only in-depth injury report analyzing all 32 teams and over 150 players. So go to sixscore.com to get the most accurate NFL preseason injury report. That's sixscore.com.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in the set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people. What in the world is going on in Miami, Don?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take the room.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern.
Live right here on College Football Today on SportsGrid, we get you set for every single game around week number 8 that featured a ranked team in college football. Number 12, Notre Dame, on the road today in Atlanta. This game played inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium against a really good underdog in Georgia Tech. But big news for the Yellow Jackets yesterday. Haynes King not expected to play in this game. It moved the line nearly 2 touchdowns in favor of the Fighting Irish. Kev, Notre Dame against non-MAC teams, a perfect 4-0 against the spread this year. But we know how good Georgia Tech is as an underdog under Brent Key. Can Notre Dame win this game comfortably in the A?
They should. They're better. They're much better than basically everyone they've played. I hate this team so much. I know that this is just not, unless you're a Notre Dame fan, this makes no sense to anybody, okay. I imagine. Every time they're out there drilling a team, it's like, great. And then I get really depressed knowing that they left themselves zero wiggle room because they had one of the worst losses they've had in 25, ever in the program's history. Georgia Tech is with a backup quarterback. They had a step-up game against Louisville. They lost. Georgia Tech's big claim to fame this year was beating Florida State, correct, who's turned out to be one of the worst teams at the FBS power level. So Notre Dame should roll in this game, but I'm not sure I fully trust them to do that.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame wins. I think maybe Georgia Tech, just because of how the spread is fluctuated 11.5 down. Then somebody must have gotten some bad info thinking Haynes King was a go. Yeah. Down to 9.5, and then late yesterday it's Zach Pyron and back up to almost double digits and 2 touchdowns. Right. They are a balanced offense, right? They run for over 200. They throw it for over 200 with Haynes King. They have some playmakers. They're on a technically neutral field right down from Bobby Dodd. It's a fast track. I'll take the points here, but the biggest thing for me that I think big picture allows Notre Dame to be live to maybe save Kev, only giving up 897 passing yards in that secondary. Yeah. I mean, we are in week number 8 now. Depending upon how this plays out, let's just say give them 1,000 yards. You can win like that. When you're holding opposing offenses to 47% completion percentage, you can win a ton of games. And if Leonard comes on, look, big picture, I'm a believer in Notre Dame. Yeah. Again, they win, but I'll take the points with the yellow.
Listen, Notre Dame is one of 8 teams around the country allowing less than 275 total yards, less than 15 points per game this season. 8th best scoring defense, 11.7 for the Irish. Always good in the secondary, are going to take a hit losing Benjamin Morrison for the season. But with that being said, the Irish allowing more than 120 yards per game on the ground. We know how good Haynes King is with his legs. We'll see about Zach Pyron. Jamal Haynes, great the last couple of weeks. 19 carries, $128 against Duke, 170 and 2 scores against UNC. I do think Notre Dame wins this game comfortably. Yes?
Can I ask a selfish question?
Please.
Can they survive a loss to one of the service academies now if they're ranked?
Like, it depends. Is it 23-20?
Sure.
It all depends on what happens with the SEC, because if Ole Miss drops 4 games,
Ole Miss is done. They better.
Well, I'm just saying, where Texas A&M loses down the stretch, they could be alive.
Listen, the Irish again. Team win total before the year, 10.5. The under had the juice at -170. The same exact price as the Irish's price to reach the college football playoff. So they were anticipating 10-2, multiple losses in this new 12-team era, at least from the odds makers' side of things. Now let's move it on to our next game up. Could it be a dog Saturday in the SEC? A really good noon Eastern slate, by the way, as well. Missouri, still a top 20 team in the country, off the bye after the loss to Texas A&M a couple of weekends ago. 3.5-point favorite, Joe, hosting Auburn. Who wins the Battle of the Tigers?
It's 3.5 now. I think Auburn's live. I really do. They've lost 3 straight. They're coming out of a bye week. I still believe in Peyton Thorne, and I'll take a shot with Hugh Freeze. I was on Missouri, laying the 27.5 against UMass. I think they're totally mediocre. I don't think they're great. I'll take Auburn.
Let me just say this. I love you. I feel like every reason I'm on Missouri, you tipped at the beginning of that breakdown by going, that's 3.5. Sure.
Right. Yeah.
The number's garbage. Missouri has been tanked. This is bottom of the market here. This team at 3.5 at home. Everyone's like, Auburn should have a better record. Yeah, well, they don't, and they've lost to non-ranked teams at home. Missouri's 3.5 in their own building. If this was 7, no play. Great pick by you guys. 3.5, it's got to be Mizzou.
Auburn, the team off the bye. Missouri last week handling UMass as they do against non-power competition. We give you the bets next.
That kid on the 2-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People crystallized Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else, and they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
One more ranked team to get to before we give you the betting cards for week number 8 of this college football campaign. Texas A&M, 14th in the country, off since the dominant win at home against Missouri. Kev, you have made this point about this A&M team. Only 14th in the AP Top 25, but 10th best price to win a national championship at 40-1 right now on those odds book. How do you feel about A&M in this matchup, laying 19.5 against a Mississippi State team that has been a hefty underdog in every SEC game?
I was actually a little excited to lay this with A&M. I've been kind of trying to find the appropriate spot to bet against Mississippi State. Because of that Toledo loss, we saw their numbers kind of shoot up the sky, and boom, they cover against Texas, right? And I'm like, all right, well, maybe now we're going to get some value with Georgia. I'm like, probably a little too much, pull back, and they cover that game as well. But now I look at it here, now I wonder if the books are still baking in the Toledo performance too much. Elko's off of a bye, 2-0 against the number in the first half in his 2 seasons at Duke, so maybe we could see A&M early. But the other angle of this is Michael Van Buren, the freshman QB for the Bulldogs, might have some juice here. If I'm on this game, I would look towards maybe a first half over, Joe, but I couldn't find enough value to bet it confidently.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, if you're looking last year, they got hammered. Texas A&M beat them 51-10. They're a different team, obviously, from last year than this year. Front seven for Miss State, giving up 201 rushing yards per game, but in back-to-back games against Texas and Georgia, under 200 yards.
Well said.
So that shows me that Jeff Lebby, all right, they're not winning games, right? But they're starting to progress, starting to understand the scheme from a defensive perspective. Maybe they are slowly getting better. I'm not suggesting that they win as an 18.5-point dog, but I'll be inclined to take the points in Starkville just because it's a very difficult place to play. And I keep going back to Trevor Knight in 2016 when A&M went in there. They were ranked 4th in the college football playoff, and they lost outright by Rodgers and the crew. They got smashed.
The Bulldogs have covered in their last 2 games. Again, getting at least 33 points in each of those. They are the worst scoring defense in the SEC, the worst total defense in the SEC, and by large margins. But like Joe said, steady improvement against very difficult competition the last 2 weeks. And Michael Van Buren, 306 yards and 3 touchdowns in a shootout last week against Georgia between the hedges. All right, now it is time for our betting cards. We will hit the big game best bets in our final 2 segments to get you ready for week number 8. We start with the mastermind, your non-big game best bets for this Saturday.
Yeah, I just have to say something. When we put together these betting cards every day, I throw the picks in on Friday night accordingly, right? This is the first half of my picks. I love the second half of my picks. These I'm looking at, I'm like, where did these come from? They were involved in the mix. But I do like Michigan minus the 3.5 on the road against Illinois. They've won 6 straight in the series, the last 4 by an average margin of victory of 27.4 points per game. They're coming out of a bye week. Illinois has allowed back-to-back games now over 200 yards. I think Michigan gets back to basics. They run the football, lower scoring game, and I'm willing to lay it on the road, which I still believe is the better team in Michigan minus the 3.5. We'll go to East Lansing. In the Big Ten. Michigan State now, I think it's up to 6.5, but I booked it at 5.5 against Iowa. Jonathan Smith, as an underdog, typically very good coach, especially in his days in Oregon State. I'm not a big buyer in Iowa big picture. This game last year was 10 points. Michigan State did cover the 13, I believe, point number last year, even though different coaching staff. I think they could be live in this matchup. They run the football, keep it low scoring. Give me Michigan State. I think they could potentially win it outright, guys, at home in this matchup. Auburn, we talked about it. When I put it in last night, it was 4.5. Now it's down to 3.5. I'll still roll with Hugh Freeze just because coming out of a bye week, losers of 3 straight. I think he needs a big-time win. He's got to pull out all the stops. I'm not a buyer of Brady Cook and Missouri big picture, especially on a defensive side of the ball. I think Auburn can potentially run the football. Auburn's put together games of halves of football. I need to see the full 4-quarter effort. Maybe on the road they could do it and strike the upset, get their first win in 4 games. And then Northwestern, guys, plus the 7.5. I did like Wisconsin last week. Couldn't bet it, obviously, in New Jersey. but Northwestern at home typically steps up against Wisconsin. This is a rivalry type of game, and they cover about 80% of the time over the last 6 meetings. Give me Northwestern with the points with that offense.
Wisconsin has been great offensively the last 2 weeks. Their first time in Big Ten action, back-to-back games with 500 total yards in each in over a decade, nearly a decade and a half since 2010, but they always struggle with the Cats. Final game, by the way, on the shores of Lake Michigan at Northwestern Medicine Field. The final 2 home games for Northwestern at Wrigley Field in November against Ohio State and Illinois. Kevin Walsh, your betting card, non-big game best bets is what?
Yeah, so let's get involved with Donovan Edwards in the receiving game. 11 plus, 10.5, but 11 plus over there at minus 125. I think it's a really nice number. Tuttle did hit him twice for 23 yards, which makes up 50% of the receiving yards on the year for Donovan Edwards. If you look this season, he's only averaging 5 yards per reception, which is about half his career average. With Tuttle there, I think he'll look to Donovan Edwards. He can hit this in one play. I think the alts make a lot of sense. Khalil Mullings, who I know is still positioned as the lead back, completely non-factor in the receiving game. Just one catch on this season. Look for Donovan Edwards through the air. Mention Missouri, laying 3.5. This is a number thing here. Find me the spread math where this number makes sense unless you think Missouri is bad or you believe Auburn is really good. I don't think Missouri's bad. I definitely don't think Auburn is really good. At 3.5, I'm buying low on Mizzou. I think people are still selling way too high off of them getting rolled by Texas A&M. Sneaky, weird, sell high. Bryson Daly under 98.5 passing yards. If anything, I'm showing respect to the troops. Their identity is running it. Stop throwing it. For like 24 yards a reception, by the way. The whole thing's nuts here. He's under this in 50% of the games this season. He's only averaging 80 yards per game. I'm playing Bryson Daly under 98.5 passing yards, and I'm playing UCF plus 13.5. Great spot against Iowa. This number climbs due to the fact that it's Ja'Cory Brown instead of KJ Jefferson. No evidence that suggests KJ is better than Ja'Cory Brown. Certainly none that says he's markedly better here. This Iowa State defense, a little vulnerable against the run, I think, this season. UCF, we know, can run it. R.J. Harvey has a big game. I think he finds the end zone. I think Central Florida covers.
Iowa State allowing more than 140 yards on the ground, despite being tied for the 5th best scoring defense in the country and one of the best against the pass as well. I am leaning into Auburn plus 4.5 for these Auburn Tigers in the battle of the Tigers, mainly because of a fade of Missouri. 0-3 against the number, against Power 4 competition, against non-power competition, sensational. They've allowed a total of 3 points, but every Power 4 team, Boston College, Vanderbilt, and then A&M, put up at least 21 points. I think Auburn can figure it out. Don't care if it's Peyton Thorne. I want Jarquez Hunter to have a big day. Give me Auburn in the upset, but I'll take the 4.5 points now down to 3 and a hook. How about off show? Wake Forest, UConn today in stores over 56.5. We got spurned a couple of weeks ago by Connecticut and their team total at home against Temple. Wake Forest, we're scoring defense in the ACC, over in 5 of 6. UConn in its first 3 home games, over in every one, at least 41 points, over against the Demon Deeks. We're also going over USC and Maryland, 56.5. USC over in 3 of 4 Big Ten games. Maryland over in all 3 Big Ten games. We see some points. The Terps not great in Big Ten play. Miller Moss has a bounce back game. Pat Bryant over 56.5 receiving yards for Illinois against Michigan. Michigan is terrible against the pass. Pat Bryant is Luke Altmaier's favorite target. Khalil Mullings on the other side against a bad Illini rushing defense. Becomes the lead back once again today, over 81.5 rushing yards. Donovan can still get it done as a receiver. Jaden Higgins over 77.5 receiving yards for Iowa State. The big games of this Saturday. Next.
That kid on the 2-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People crystallized Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else. And they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What a monumental Saturday Week 8 is going to be. Could it be the best Saturday of the year? I know I say it all the time, but it feels like this day is in store for exactly that. Kevin Walsh, Joe Lisi, and Ben Stevens, the games that we deem the biggest around the country in college football, and the best bets for each and every one. Noon Eastern time is an illustrious slate to start off your Week 8 Saturday. We start in Bloomington for 16th ranked Indiana hosting Nebraska. The Hoosiers, a 6.5-point favorite. Total now stands at 49.5. Let's break down this game with some bets. Kevin, we start with you. You're looking at the freshman signal caller, Dylan Raiola, in a big spot for Nebraska. If he goes over the passing touchdowns prop, what do you think that means for the Huskers?
Well, I think it means they're competitive, but it could happen in a trailing situation. We saw that for Billy Edwards in Maryland. We saw that for Northwestern with both of their quarterbacks going over the 1.5 passing touchdown marker. It's a bounce-back spot for Raiola as well. Me playing the prop here is partly because I think the side is very tricky. I think you're seeing the top of the market probably on Indiana, unless they win by a big margin here. But Matt Rule's 0-4 against the spread against ranked teams during his time with the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and their ability to lose close games is also tough to kind of get to the window here. All I'm going to trust is Dylan Raiola gets over 1.5 passing touchdowns.
I think he gets over that, and I think that opens up the rushing attack for Nebraska. I said I thought this game was going to be won in the trenches. I still believe Nebraska is the best team that Indiana has faced up until this point, and more battle-tested in big games, the way they contained Shedeur Sanders in Colorado, albeit even though it was at home. I'll take that secondary. Give me Nebraska, like the 6.5, Ben, but I honestly believe they win the game outright.
It would be a big one for the Huskers, Kev. You mentioned the single-score games. They did beat Rutgers by a single score, now 2-6 straight up in one-score games under Matt Rule. Indiana tied for the second-best offense in the country in terms of their scoring output, 47.5 points per game. But for me, I think it comes down to the defense. IU really good in that component as well. If Nebraska is going to keep this game tight, have it decided by a single score, it's got to stay under. Now 49.5, Nebraska under in 5 of 6 games throughout this season, despite the Hoosiers going over in 5 of 6. That game bright and early, noon Eastern time. First home sellout in Bloomington since 2021. We can expect a great atmosphere in Louisville as well. Also a noon Eastern time kick. It's number 6 Miami on the road and unbeaten as a 4.5-point favorite against Louisville. As we break down this game between the Cards and the Canes, Lisi, we start with you. How do you approach with your best bet?
I think it's the rushing attack of Miami. I think it's physicality in regards to the Hurricanes coming off the week of preparation. I think that benefits them, and I think they have a significant defensive line of advantage against Louisville's offensive line. I'm not sold on Tyler Shuck. I think he's inconsistent, especially in big spots. As much as Cam Ward needs to be effective, guys, it is Damian Martinez. I did alt him from 60 to 100 in regards to the matchup. Anytime touchdown as well. Keep an eye out. I think they start fast. I think they win this ball game by double digits. One of my better picks.
I'm on Cam Ward to find the end zone here. I know it's a rarity, but this is the biggest advantage I felt when I was going through this game. Ward has now scored in 3 of his last 5. And, again, Louisville has not just been torched yardage-wise. All of these quarterbacks find the end zone. That's Riley Leonard. That's Jennings. Yeah. That's against the lower-level competition. Calandria found the end zone for UVA. I believe it's 4 of the last 5 quarterbacks they've seen have hit the end zone against Louisville. Cam Ward has done it more so in that trailing situation where only passing takeoff. Well, the people think the dog could be barking. That situation could be there for Cam Ward.
I really love this look, and at plus 175, I think there is a really good number associated. He has scored in the last 2 Miami, a difficult test today for the Canes. The Cards have been an interesting team to figure out this year. It has been a lot of the veteran Tyler Shuck, but they have found their way in the backfield as well, trusting the freshman Isaac Brown instead of the Miami transfer Donald Chaney. Over $140 last week and multiple scores against Virginia. Numbers just a little bit too light. Now north of 70, I like either price, either bet, either over for Isaac Brown. A Miami defense that has regressed slightly in their last 2 games. Those 2 non-covers against Virginia Tech and Cal. It's a significant Saturday in the SEC. Will the Hogs, as the Dogs, be barking once again in Fayetteville? Arkansas hosts number 8 LSU. Have a 2.5-point spread in favor of the Bayou Bengals. How do you see it?
I look for Talon Green to get over this 35.5. When we talk side, if I'm betting it, I'm only betting Arkansas +3 due to Sam Pittman being undeniable off of a bye, but I couldn't get to the number. I could get to a buy low spot on Talon Green. Last 2 games, 1 total rush yard. The prior 4 averaged 80 per game, which is why 35.5 here is a beautiful number.
Yeah.
Because LSU is getting to the quarterback. We're going to lose yardage due to the sacks. But that's going to stop us from seeing the 60, 70 type of performance from Green off a bye. I love him to scoot here.
Yeah, he might get it in garbage time. I know you could call me Joey Chalk. I'm going with the favorite again. I really like LSU. They've won 7 of the last 8, last 2 meetings by 6 points. But it's the defense for LSU. I keep talking about it. 19 total sacks over the last 4 weeks. Forget, Pig Suey. LSU smashed job. Smashed them. One of my better bets. LSU in Miami. They roll.
You have something you want to say before I go?
No.
It looked like you were perked up a little bit to say something at the monitor.
You got some kryptonite on that side. Just be careful. Be careful.
Well, he's not on a side. He's on a prop.
I'm just
saying. You know how when that kryptonite picks one way, it doesn't count? It's like you and LSU.
Yeah. Tough one for him, though. He's got Arkansas swag. He normally likes Sam Pittman as an underdog. 21-9 is Arkansas against the number with Sam Pittman as the head coach. 2020, a perfect 4-0 ATS this year as an underdog. They've won 2 of those games outright. You like Talon Green on the ground?
Yeah.
I did like this number as well, but LSU's propensity to get after the quarterback lately, 6 sacks last week against Ole Miss, kept me off it a little bit. So I'll go Talon Green through the air. I still have some questions about this LSU defense, gave up nearly 500 total yards last week against Ole Miss. In Green, in 3 previous games for the Razorbacks this year against ranked foes, has thrown for at least 266 yards. This is part of a significant Saturday in the SEC. The top 5 tilt in Austin and the 3rd Saturday in October. Next.
That kid on the 2-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People crystallized Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else, and they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Live right here on College Football Today. It's the big game, best bets. It's a significant third Saturday in October in the SEC. And that means we start on Rocky Top. To Knoxville we go. A top 15 tilt between 11th ranked Tennessee and number 7 Alabama. It's a 3.5-point spread in favor of the Crimson Tide on the road against the Volunteers. Joe Lisi, as you see this game playing out, it's a rivalry matchup. It's the third Saturday in October. It's the 107th all-time meeting. The Crimson Tide have won 16 of the last 17. The only win for Tennessee in that span on Rocky Top 2 years ago. How do you see it playing out?
Well, when they won 2 years ago, they had one of the most prolific quarterbacks in Hendon Hooker, right? Nico hasn't lived up to those type of expectations. But on the other side, you have the best deep ball passer in the history of FBS, Jalen Milroe, sliced and diced that Tennessee defense. Alabama wins. They move to 17 of 18 against Tennessee. What do you think about that?
I think you're asking to lose when you make fun of guys you're backing, if I'm honest.
Best deep ball passer.
No, it is, and it's been true for 2 years, but that's all right. No, Commanders, hey, why don't you give me your Commanders-Panthers breakdown? Let's get that out of the way. I like Jaden Daniels to break out for the 9th time in a row.
Rookie of the year.
Now, here's the deal. I think realistically is I wasn't scared to do what you always want to do. I checked the rundown. I see Ben's bet. I know what I like. I said, let's do it. 2 horns, 2 Rams, lock up in the end zone, and let's see who wins this battle. Vols over to 27.5 team total. Heupel averages 36.5 a game at home in SEC play. And I'm not even using what he does to the bad teams. They scored 140 points in the first 2 games at home. Coming off of a letdown game against Florida, that was because they were shut out in the first half. That does not happen here in a rivalry spot against the defense who has allowed 3 straight power opponents over their team total. The only power opponent who stayed under, lost their quarterback in the first drive of this game. Nico steps up over 27.5.
Right. Indirect competition. I go under 27.5 for Tennessee. 25 points or less in all 3 SEC games for the Volunteers. I have some questions about Nico Iamaleava. I do think Dylan Sampson, 99.5, is the staple of that offense for the Vols. This is put up or shut up time for Alabama. They win this game with a good defensive effort on Rocky Top, and I do lean with the Crimson Tide getting that done.
Good luck.
Everybody all over the place.
Good luck.
I'm giving out bad info for the Outlaws.
He feels good.
All right, as we go to our next game, it is a showdown in prime time in Austin. The first time that Texas has hosted a top 5 team since 2006. And the number 1 team in the country is booked as such, a 4.5-point favorite at home in Austin against number 5 Georgia. Joe Lisi, we start with you before we might hear some barking on the other side.
Yeah, I think this game is won in the trenches as well. I think Georgia does have a slight advantage. I think the rushing attack does take over. And again, I brought it up in regards to Quinn Ewers. He's not mobile like Jalen Milroe. That's what gave Georgia's defense fits in that matchup. Is he 100%? Only time will tell. But I'll take the more consistent team that has been in this spot, and you're giving them disrespect at 4.5 points. Dogs are barking, baby, outright over Texas. That's it. Bark.
You put that into Google
Bark
Translate, it means dogs by a bunch, baby. Listen, it's only Alabama that has been able to touch Kirby for 4 years. Texas has played no one. This is their real first SEC game. In SEC, they played Oklahoma. That doesn't count. And Mississippi State. They're laying 4.5. 5 at other spots. If you look around to Georgia, we won't need 5, 4.5, 3, 2, 1. It does not matter. Beck steps up. Georgia wins this game and take their rightful spot atop that AP ranking. Don't be cowards, by the way, AP. Ben's top 10 will handle it if you can.
Wow. I will certainly handle it if Georgia wins this football game up from 2 to 1, because in my top 10, this is 1 versus 2, not just a top 5 tilt. Here is the key for me for Georgia. Getting back to elite defense. We know the offense has it for Carson Beck. There is one elite defense on paper entering this game, and it's the Longhorns. Can Georgia's defense in a Kirby Smart spot rise to the occasion? I say yes, and if that happens, we stay under 56.5 for the Bulldogs and the Longhorns tonight.
Arch Manning's going to have to play in this game. They're going to scrape
Trevor Etienne.
Are you kidding me?
Etienne, 80+, I'm on him.
Right
Nate Frazier look at plus 310 to find the end zone as Etienne spurned me last week against Mississippi State. I will say, Carson Beck in 4 ranked regular season games last year, 298 plus in 3 of the 4. He is Kevin Walsh. He is Joe Lisi. I am Ben Stevens. That does it for us today on College Football Today. Week number 8 starts right now.
Can't sometimes look at the point spreads and just, understand what they mean. Because going into the game, you're looking at it, it's like, okay, Denver's playing better football. They won a couple in a row, and now they're going back home.
The Broncos have to turn around and play on a short week. Sean Payton is returning to New Orleans. The Saints just gave up almost 600 yards of offense to the Buccaneers. So it's going to be interesting kind of gut check.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
But if you're playing the odds and you're looking for something that is a more favorable opportunity, it seems like Bo Naylor doing nothing tonight and just watching paint dry is a good investment.
I'm assuming he's in the bottom 3 or 4 of their lineup, which also puts him at risk to be pinch hit, which is great if you have that under. Gets up once or twice, and all of a sudden later in the game, they pinch hit for him, and then you're just free and clear.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
That kid on the 2-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People,
crystallized Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else. And they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.